All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Thompson. I'm a detective with the New York City Police Department. I am also an adjunct associate research scientist with Columbia University Department of Psychiatry in the Medical Center. So it's from those two roles where I am incredibly proud and fortunate to say I helped put together, I guess this is going to be my bad pun number one, a very awesome event. That's the game plan. But you guys as the audience get to decide, and all the pressures on our speakers, starting with our first few that are going to start very shortly, including our keynote Dacher, and including our police commissioner who just sat in. He's going to give us some welcoming remarks. It's from that role from both the NYPD and Columbia Medical Center, again, a genuine, true partnership of showing the work we do is incredibly important, but it must be research evidence-based, and then it must be designed to be practically implemented, not just for police, all first responders, frontline workers, and everybody that's here. No matter who you are, let me be very clear with one thing is we all deserve to have positive mental health. And that's especially true, everything that every one of us have been involved in this past year alone with COVID and everything else. And it's pretty significant when we talk about resilience and the concept of perspective of we can't make COVID disappear at the snap of a finger, but it's how we approach it and handle things. And that was really the mindset of bringing in Dacher first as the keynote speaker for this event, and all our other speakers, is how incredibly powerful awe is. And I know sometimes when I mention the word awe, people don't understand the word I'm saying with my New York accent, apparently. And I know we have people from 35 countries. I think you know the word I'm saying because that is what brought you here to this symposium. But in case not, AWE, I will say that only once. I'm not going to say much more other than to open us up. We have two wonderful speakers. The first that I will turn it over to very briefly is our police commissioner. And then after him, we'll have Dr. Mann from Columbia University as well. And Commissioner, I'm going to turn it over to you very biasly. I'll give you a very short introduction. Greatest police department in the greatest city of the world. And I am incredibly honored and privileged to show our police commissioners here to show that we back up our words with actions. And this event is a demonstration of that, and to show the seriousness of improving resilience and enhancing it within our workforce, but everyone else, not just internally, but this event as an external one. Commissioner, thank you for everything, your leadership, and being here today. So I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, Jeff, I'm sorry, I sat down a little late. Were you saying you're in awe of me? Is that what I missed there, Jeff? Listen, good morning, everyone. And I understand we're now up to 35 countries, so that's quite an accomplishment. I want to thank everyone for allowing me to just speak for a moment today to take part in this critical discussion. I want to thank the Columbia University School of Psychiatry for co-sponsoring the important event with those of us here at the New York City Police Department. As Jeff said, the greatest police department in the world, I like to say. This is a time worldwide to understand causes and consequences, and more importantly, to look for new ways to prevent crises. It's a time to approach issues from new angles. It's a time for change. And change can be a very good thing, I would say, in my opinion. I feel that if we're not evolving, we're not really moving forward. Speaking from my perspective in law enforcement, I'll say that connecting credible research experts and resilience practitioners with police officers benefits everyone. It helps people that we serve in our communities. It helps organizations, and it keeps individual healthy family members healthy physically and mentally. It also helps us to establish and maintain effectiveness at work, while also helping to cultivate thriving personal lives. Now, in spite of a wide array of personal and professional challenges, police officers today across America and the world continue to put on uniforms each day. And let me tell you, it's been a heck of a year. And they perform incredible acts, all in the name of keeping people safe. So without a doubt, societal pressures and the unique aspects this year of COVID has made this an extraordinary difficult time, as Jeff said. But I can't imagine a more important moment in history than right now to join with our partners, to learn from, to support, and to sit down with each other and discuss how do we move forward. Our hope is that this symposium increases collaboration, as I've said, between researchers and practitioners, teaches us how to enhance resilience, and also overall positive mental health. And just as important, helps us to identify resources that we could all use together. We're here to listen. We're here to learn. We're here to share ideas. And we're also here to work together and to meet towards meaningful solutions. Again, I want to thank all of our participants for what you do each day in our communities. The work that you do saves lives. It's as simple as that. And the work you do here saves lives too. Please know that the NYPD, the entire NYPD, thanks you for all your expertise and for this incredible partnership. I know all of our attendees today will get a lot out of the seminar. Thanks again for being here, and everyone stay safe.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I appreciate it. And next, we're going to turn it over to Dr. John Mann from Columbia Psychiatry and Columbia University Medical Center. One thing I will say is for anybody that's interested in reading more on any of our speakers and panelists, I'm not going to read through their whole bios. I encourage you to click the website to read their incredibly impressive bio. And as I work for the NYPD, I also work for Dr. John Mann at Columbia as well, and learning from him and his awesome team and everybody up there. I can consider myself lucky. And Dr. Mann, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It's a pleasure and an honor to be involved with this conference. You are a wonderful example of what the NYPD is all about, creating and setting up this conference. Over 1,700 attendees, so many countries represented. It's really so impressive. I think it just shows the power of what can be accomplished. And the unification of so many people under this virtual umbrella is incredibly powerful as a way of knowing who else is out there trying to achieve similar goals and purposes, which gives everybody more strength, more encouragement, raises morale, and so on. Yes, this conference is a very important one. We at the university emphasize research. We have research, as you know, and hardcore medical facts have not been the most popular theme in recent years. But we have pressed on and done our job. Much like the NYPD, we have also been in the front line of dealing with COVID-19. People have been pretty grateful, but when we ask them to go out and get vaccines, they've not always been that cooperative. So we know what this illness is. It's killed 550,000 Americans. It's real, and we want everybody to be vaccinated. That's one way of getting resilience. Another way of getting resilience is to look inside yourself and to try and realize what your real potentials are. And most of us underestimate what we can accomplish. And this conference is all about that. This conference is about identifying some inner strengths. It's not about taking pills. It's about identifying inner strengths, about rethinking who you are, where you are, what the world is about, and what you can accomplish to deal with it more effectively. And you're going to hear from a wonderful array of speakers. There's going to be a huge number of opportunities to learn and ask questions. But all along in this process, the university represents the harder news, which is we need to show things work. We need to use more and more, the more promising the opportunity and the approaches, the more important it is to use the same kinds of rigorous standards that we use for vaccines to make sure those vaccines are safe for you. We want to know that what approaches to awe really work and provide evidence-based help for you as an individual, for your organization, for your police department, and so on and so forth. Anyway, I'm very excited about this conference. The speakers are terrific. Jeff Thompson has done an amazing job, and I hope that everybody is enriched and enhanced by the experience of participating. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Mann. And it truly is. It took a great team effort to help put this together. And you know that you were part of it as well. So thank you for your leadership and guidance on everything. It really doesn't have to be complicated. It truly does not. And as we'll hear, and I'm not taking away from anybody's presentations, it's not just going to the Eiffel Tower or the Grand Canyon or the Great Barrier Reef. There's opportunities everywhere, but they're only there if we allow them to be. And that's on you and nobody else. And that is the true essence of resilience. Taking ownership of what you can in situations and realizing certain stuff is beyond our control. And as I segue to you, Dacher, again, I'm just going to give a very brief introduction because it would take up your whole time slot to talk about how awesome and wonderful you are. I reached out to Dacher regarding this symposium. It was early mid-March, and I'm sure you remember Dacher because I sent you a few emails, one after the other, following up. We call that being New Yorkish, and I don't call that pushy at all. And when I had the first idea of putting this symposium together, there was only one person that was doing the keynote. And I'm not kidding either. I didn't know if I was going to go forward with it if you said no, because it would be a disservice to the field of awe if you weren't part of it. And I guess spoiler alert for everybody, you know how this turned out because Dacher is the keynote. So Dacher, look, I know how busy you are in everything you're doing. The one thing I will say among your many attributes, you're the co-director of the Greater Good Science Center. You're at UC Berkeley. And there is one name connected with awe, research and practice, and it's yours. And I'm not saying this to build it, I mean that genuinely. And if there's anybody in their leadership in the field of awe and resilience and mental health and positive psychology that's been able to really spearhead bridging the gap of research with actual practice, it's you. And so I'm really proud to have you here, part of this. I will turn it over to you. And then once you're done, we'll bring it, we'll check in with Linda and the chief, and we'll take it from there. So for this moment forward, Dacher, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Jeff. What an honor to be here. Let me just get this going here. And all right. Jeff, I think this is a historic conference. Thank you for this privilege to speak to this community. All of you who are serving through your work, I want to express my gratitude for your service in the hardest work that's out there. And it is a privilege to talk about the science of awe. As you will get a sense of from the speakers that Jeff has put together, one of the great privileges of our work is to really help change the world. As the police commissioner said, it is time for change. Our own work, and you'll hear from Craig Anderson later, has really explored the place of awe with veterans because there's so much courage there, as there is in the people who serve the community in the way that you do. So what an honor to be here. So first, a quick story. In 2010, I got a phone call from Pete Docter, who's a director at Pixar, and he had just made the movie Up. And he called me up and he said, "Hey, Dacher, you know, I want to make this movie, and it's about the emotions of a young girl." And I was like, "Wow, that's kind of interesting." And he brought me in as a scientific consultant for what would become Inside Out. And on my first visit to Pixar, when I was talking to Pete and his team about making this movie, Pete said, "You know, look, we've got 5 emotions: anger, fear, sadness, disgust, and joy. If you could add one emotion to the movie, what emotion would you add?" And at this time in 2010, Lonnie Sciotta and other people that you hear from today were starting to discover what's interesting about awe. And I pitched awe, right? I said, why not have an awe character in Inside Out? Awe is the feeling of when you encounter vast things that are mysterious, that you don't understand. It occurs in things like music and the like. So Pete, you know, and his small team there told a few jokes. They thought about the young character in Inside Out going to dance or going out to see the skyscrapers of New York City. They drew a couple of scenes. They laughed at, but unfortunately, awe did not make the movie Inside Out. And today, I think is a story about how important this emotion is and what an interesting character it would have been in that movie. So what I'd like to orient you all to today is 3 questions. What is awe? I've given you one definition. It's when we encounter vast mysteries that we don't understand. How does awe work? You're going to be learning a lot about awe in the next couple of days. What does it do to our minds? How does it influence how we behave in the world? And then in some sense, the deepest question we can ask is why awe, right? Why should we be bringing awe into our work lives, our family lives, our community lives? And really, as the police commissioner said, use it as a tool for social change. And I think it's one of the most powerful ways that we can bring about the world. So the first question is, what is awe? And To answer that question, you can do a couple of different things. You can ask people, tell me a story about awe, right? Tell me, where did you experience awe? What was it like? Just tell a personal story, as people have been doing for thousands of years. So we actually did that. Yang Bai and I and a variety of collaborators asked people from 26 countries around the world who really come from every religious tradition, different kinds of economic conditions, different kinds of political circumstances, different sorts of ideas about the self and gender. And what we find is what I call the 8 wonders of life, that, as Jeff said, there is so much awe to have in the world, to experience on a daily basis. And the 8 wonders of life point us to where we can find awe. The first source of awe is other people, their courage, their strength, their kindness, how they move us. Here's a story that came from Ireland, where a woman wrote about watching my daughter, who was born with bilateral clubfoot, dance in a ballet recital for the first time. I was filled with awe. I was in the audience with my mother, and my little girl was dancing on stage. I had tears in my eyes. My heart felt like it was going to burst with pride, with flashbacks from when she was born, with her feet upside down. So many rich sources of awe from everyday courage and strength and kindness. It is everywhere around us. Second source of awe is nature. And you all know that. You go to various sources of nature in your lives, be it, the Central Park or the Rockies or whatever the case may be. This is a wonderful little story from Russia, from our study of 26 cultures. 5 years ago, I was collecting mushrooms in the forest, and I bumped into an uncommon hole in the ground. Around it, all the trees stood in a circle, as if gazing into a hole. And people often, out in experiences of nature, feel like everything is alive and connected, and the like. Music is a common source of awe. Concerts and favorite singers and favorite songs from your childhood or when you were falling in love. This is a story from Switzerland. I was around Christmas. I went to a monastery. It was snowing outside. The church was dimly lit, and I could hear these Gregorian chants. And it gave me a sense that I was part of something larger than myself. We often find awe in religious feeling and spirituality, which is a very deep study in not only religious studies, but psychological science. We found this in our study of 26 cultures. An individual from Singapore who had a common experience of falling to the ground as if hit by the spirit. He was blinded by light, and suddenly he felt like he was deeply loved by the divine or God. A couple final sources of awe is big ideas, epiphanies. Maybe this conference will give you a big idea about how to reorganize your work, right? This is one of my favorites because I love museums, and I'm an evolutionary type. It comes from Japan. A person reporting on awe. I was 12 years old. I went into a science museum, and I suddenly understood the idea of evolution of biology. I realized that humans are one of many species. And then he goes on to observe, but not particularly advantageous compared to other creatures. And then finally, very interestingly, life, the birth of life, and then death are very common experiences worldwide around awe. And in the picture, you can see of my younger brother and me when we were about 10 and 12. I lost my brother to colon cancer a couple of years ago. Brutal disease, tough way to go. And it was this opening and this sense of awe and wonder about the great questions of life and death. Very often when we really encounter deep trauma, losing people, the mind turns to wonder and to make sense of it all, and often feels awe. One of the people you'll hear about from Craig Anderson later in this conference is Stacy Bear. And Stacy Bear was a veteran who had gone through the traumas of engagement in Iraq, found awe and sort of reconceptualizing his trauma from that engagement out in nature, and then helped collaborate with us in really charting the powerful, awe-inspiring benefits of nature. So the next question we can ask, and this is in some sense what science does, but it's important, is we need to know does your feeling of awe out in nature, or seeing the ordinary kindness of a stranger, or thinking about a big idea, or in your spiritual practice, or the courage of a colleague in their work, is that feeling different from emotions like fear or interest, or when you admire somebody, or beauty? And what I will tell you, and I think you will hear throughout our presentations by leading awe scientists using different methods, is awe is its own unique state that shapes particular feelings you might have about the world, expressive behaviors, ways that you engage with your fellow human beings. I have been doing a lot of work on this topic in a couple of different approaches. One is we do very narrow comparisons between awe, for example, and amusement or pride or beauty, other positive states. We've initiated another kind of work, which is called kind of data-driven computational approaches, where we have people respond and rate their emotions to vast arrays of stimuli, right? 2,000 pieces of music, 2,000 short films, and they rate their experiences. And then we use interesting new statistics to map where is your experience of awe in this really complicated, quote, space of experience. And if you go to the talk, the video of this talk, what I present is an image of a sort of what we would call a space of emotional experience. This is people responding to 2,000 GIFs, short evocative films. And what we find is people feel up to 25 different emotions, not only to GIFs, but in other studies like responding to people's faces or music. And what's critical in this photo is that awe is its own distinct experience. It's very close to feelings of admiration, right? You hear a colleague say something really admiring, a source of admiration for you. It's also close to feelings of beauty, and it's quite far away from fear, terror, and anxiety. Awe is its own driving emotion. And that's going to be important when we talk about why awe heals. All right, so awe has 8 wonders that we can find it in. It's its own distinct experience. There's a lot of other data that you'll hear about that bear upon that question. So the next question is the how of awe. And I want to give you a framework for a lot of the studies that you will be hearing about in the next 2 days, and also how you can think about how awe drives you to change things. So this, what we think about, how we think about the how of awe is when you encounter vast, mysterious things, you feel this emotion of awe, right? Wow, this is amazing. I feel astonished. I'm blown away, right? That then has this effect that a lot of studies have documented on your sense of self. Your sense of your ego becomes smaller. It seems to vanish, and you feel connected to some larger cause or purpose or source of meaning. Such an important transformation brought about by awe. The narcissism, the ego focus, the self focus diminishes, it quiets, and you feel like you're part of something larger. One of my favorites is a study of the Pittsburgh Steelers fans, who are some of the most devoted in the NFL. When they go to the game, they have this kind of spiritual experience where they feel connected to Steeler Nation, right? The Steeler community. My sense of self diminishes and I become part of something larger. Such an interesting thing. Then what happens through that diminishing of the self is you become very curious about the world, you wonder, and you engage in really pro-social, altruistic tendencies that make for strong community. That's why this is so interesting for our conversation today when we think about first responders and people really dealing with the hard stuff of life, is awe brings about stronger communities. Let me give you one illustrative study that was inspired by one of the great pioneers in the study of awe in the United States, who was Ralph Waldo Emerson from the 19th century. Probably remember reading about Emerson in your kind of high school literature class, American Transcendentalism. His basic idea was we all have to go find our awe, our own particular experiences and sources and wonders to really find our purpose in life. And I think in the end, he was right. He found it in nature. And this is one of the most important quotes from his tradition, where he was walking on a really cold day in Massachusetts, and he kind of was struck by the beauty of being outdoors. And he said, and I'm sure a lot of you have felt this, but listen carefully to the prose. In the woods, we return to reason and faith. And there I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity that nature cannot repair. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted in infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. What a remarkable observation. I go out in nature, I hear some music, I'm around people who inspire me, and suddenly I feel connected to something larger, and that kind of mean egotistical side to the human nature, to the human being, really diminishes. So we've done a lot of tests of this hypothesis. There are now dozens of studies worldwide of the power of nature. You'll hear about some of them in this conference. In one by Paul Piff from 2015, students simply went on a part of a Berkeley campus. They stood near some beautiful trees. I hope you're following the science of trees. Trees are remarkable organisms communicating with each other, hosting a variety of other species, building their own ecosystems. Our participants stood near some trees for a minute, or in another condition, they looked up at a tall building. They're standing in the same space, but either they're feeling part of the trees or looking at this building that wasn't quite as awe-inspiring. And what we found in this research is that a minute or two, again, Jeff was encouraging us to be bold and think about how do we change our lives and those of our colleagues. Just a minute of being near the trees, people felt less self-important. These young people felt less entitled, like the world owes them something, rather problematic stance towards life. They needed less money to do the study. And we had a person come by and drop some pens who was part of the experiment. People feeling awe in the trees helped out that stranger by picking up some pens. Very robust phenomenon that awe in different contexts leads you to feel less self-focused, less worried about your own self, and you can help other people build strong communities. So the final question in my last 6-7 minutes is why awe, right? Awe, what is awe? It's the feeling of being around vast mysteries that I don't understand. It is really its own distinct state, kind of about exploring and connecting. How does awe work? It really diminishes my self-focus, my anxieties and the like, and it really gets me to explore the world and to connect to others and build community. Why awe, right? Why? And really there are a couple of ways that we can think about this question. The first is really the issue of resilience that Jeff kind of used very wisely in the title of this symposium, which is we live in a stressed out time. The CDC is suggesting that levels of anxiety and depression are 3 to 4 times their average. Stress had been rising in the United States for the past 25 years before COVID. It is an inflamed time, regrettably. Vivek Murthy, our former Surgeon General, has a wonderful book out suggesting that the most important diseases, in some sense, of the 21st century are going to be diseases of things like loneliness, too much self-focus, that what he calls inflammation, or the elevation of the parts of your immune system. So our first answer to the question of why awe is, as you will sense in to the 2 days proceedings, awe is an antidote. It's a way to change these stresses and malaises of the 21st century. So here's some sort of awe facts that you'll hear about. Around the world, people feel awe a couple of times a week. There is everyday awe to be had. As Jeff said, you don't need to go to the Eiffel Tower, right? You can find it around you. And throughout this proceedings, you will hear about how. About 3/4 of our awe experiences feel good, They're rooted in reward circuitry in your brain. They elevate the vagus nerve, which we study in our lab, which helps you calm down, find meaning, find strength. We also know that feelings of awe, about 3/4 of these positive experiences, help you feel like you have more time in life. It reduces inflammation in your immune system. It makes you more open to people, more collaborative. You don't polarize as much. You don't see those people on the other political side as your adversaries. You see some common ground. A lot of positive benefits for awe. And what you'll hear about is all the ways in which little doses of awe can help us with the stresses of life. We just published a paper led by Yang Bai and involving some of the presenters you'll hear from today. We just had people find a little dose of awe without paying a dime, without, emitting carbon into the atmosphere. One of them was they just climbed up to this tower on the Berkeley campus and got a beautiful view of the Bay Area, 220 feet in the high in the sky. Just that 5 minutes of taking in an expansive view led students to feel less stress in their daily lives, less pressure, and to have enhanced happiness. This has been replicated in all manner of studies. Awe reduces the stresses and difficulties of living. So in my work, the second way we can answer the question is, why awe? How is it part of human nature, right? And I take an evolutionary perspective on the question. We've been evolving for several 100,000 years as a very language-based primate, several million years as a hominid. And it's interesting that our primate relatives have kind of the early qualities of awe in their fluffing up of their fur that you probably see your dogs do, and certain social mammals like rats and chimpanzees that they tend to do when they're kind of respecting things. Jane Goodall, the great primatologist and environmentalist, the chimpanzees that she used to observe do this waterfall dance where when they see large winds move by or feel them, or storms or waterfalls, they kind of do this funny dance where they throw things around and they fluff up their fur. And she said, I can't help feeling that this waterfall display is triggered by feelings of wonder and awe that we feel. Why wouldn't they also have some kind of feelings of spirituality, which is really being amazed at things outside of the self? This capacity to connect to larger things is deep. I'm very interested in how our culture with art and ritualized behaviors, it's so important to build rituals into your life through things like music and dance and writing, archive awe. And in fact, when you think about how inspired we are by great movies or novels or music or paintings or the rituals of our life, going to a football game and engaging in the rituals of the team that we love, those are all ways in which our culture allows us to share awe experiences together to great benefit. What are the key takeaways? The first is, I think, is critical, as Jeff said, is there is everyday awe. You can walk out with a certain mindset and suddenly find awe in the people you're serving or in your neighbors. You can go and take a walk through a park for 5 or 10 minutes, or look up at the sunset or clouds and find awe. You can think for a moment about a piece of music that you love and find awe. Awe is not rare. It's not for the privileged. It is everywhere. And really, I hope part of what we come out of this 2 days is cultivating that. Second is awe is a pathway for healing. And we are finding this and writing about this in terms of nature and music and mindfulness, or if you practice mindfulness. There's a lot of interest right now in urban design, right? How you design spaces, play spaces, nature spaces to cultivate awe. Third point for all of you personally is awe is how we find what is sacred to us. What people might call the soul. When we go out and find awe, when I go backpacking with my daughter out in the Eastern Sierras and we get lost in the granite, and suddenly I have goosebumps and I'm tearing up, that's because that is what is sacred to me, that kind of experience, right? You will have your own form of awe, and it speaks to you as this is what is meaningful. This is where I find my purpose in life. And finally, I believe we are on the cusp of an awe revolution where we can design our world for more awe. It doesn't emit a lot of carbon into the environment. It's inexpensive, it's secular, it's non-ideological, parks, play fields. Recently in COVID, people built awe rooms for people who are, for healthcare providers who are dealing with the traumas of COVID. They went, felt a little awe, came back, they experienced less stress, lower cortisol. Let's design our world for awe. And finally, as Jeff said, please go to greatergood.berkeley.edu. We have 1 million visitors of our website. It is free. There's a ton of awe material there alongside other things. And there you can find opportunities for awe and many other things. And I very much look forward to our panel discussion and your own questions out there. Thank you very
Excellent.
much.
Thank you so much, Dacher. Thank you very much. Let's jump in now to our expert panelists, and we'll start off first, and we'll go to Linda, if that's okay with you, Chief. We'll go to Linda first. Again, I encourage everybody to read both of their bios because they're beyond impressive, but super briefly, Linda is phenomenal. She's currently the Director of External Relations at Columbia University at the Department of Psychiatry, and prior to that, an incredible, I think it's 15 years as the President and CEO of the National Council for Behavioral Health. So I hope everybody realizes we didn't just call random people from the hallway to be our expert panelist. Linda certainly is, and then right after her, we're going to hear from the Chief as well. Linda, please just, how about some insights, and if you have any questions for Dacher, please.
First of all, let me start by thanking you, Jeff. You're awesome. So I don't know how that connects to awe. I want to thank you and Dr. Mann and, of course, Dacher Keltner for, I am new to this. So when Jeff sent an email about awe, I didn't know what he was talking about. And I thought it was like a new invention, and I Googled it. And so I have to admit, this is a new concept. It's been fascinating because I did go to your website. I did read some of your pieces, trying to understand this. So I'm somebody that, I started as a social worker, ran a psychiatric hospital, clinics in the community, then went and was in Albany doing policy work as a senior deputy commissioner at the New York State Office of Mental Health, and spent 15 years in Washington, a lot of time on the Hill. And so I'm always thinking about scope and spread and how it fits with the current issues and challenges we're struggling with. So let me see if I can just very briefly explain that, right? So we have, and you mentioned Vivek Murthy, by the way, who is now our current Surgeon General. He was nominated again. He had been Obama's. Biden nominated him again, and they confirmed him. And he is someone, who is very focused on loneliness, connection. So I like the concept of awe. It made me think about, times I've been awed, right? And the feelings you describe, really resonate. But if it's going to be something that can help create tighter communities and connectedness, what is the dose and duration that we need for people to experience to really then begin to change and interact differently? And I don't understand that. Are you not ready for that because your research hasn't gone there yet? But we would need to understand that if this term is actually going to be seen as something like emotional regulation, in fact, something that people can use not only in their lives, but create a society, cultures, communities that are more connected and healthier. So that's my primary question to begin with.
Yeah, I think that, I do a lot of work in kind of the well-being space, and the dose question is central to all of the different traditions. Gratitude is really good for people. It's good for families. It's good for work contexts. How much, right? Mindfulness. Some of you may be practicing mindfulness. How much? You'll hear from Virginia Sturm, who has found one time a week where you go search for awe helps 75 years old participants and older reduce levels of depression and anxiety. And that's a powerful effect. We have been finding about one time a week for 15 minutes, an awe walk, listen to some awe music. It benefits the nervous system and inflammation and stress and anxiety. So but I would also say I would try to make it a regular practice. And I think that will be the challenge of the different subcultures that think about this concept is, how do we build awe into, I would do a lot of work with healthcare providers, medical doctors, physicians, assistants. They're dealing with so much trauma right now. How do they find awe in their work? And that will be the creativity we need. But once a week for 15 minutes is pretty good.
And I would encourage you, before I turn this over, obviously, to the chief, we are paying lots of attention to schools right now with just many, many issues and problems. But curriculums in schools around resilience and the development of resilience, emotional regulation that I mentioned before, can you begin to have a pathway? And I don't know how involved you get in actually policy work to get this concept embedded in some of those curriculums so that they take hold at an early age.
What I love about awe and those 8 wonders of life, right, is, so for example, in COVID, we had historically high levels of use of our trails. People were going out into nature to find awe, right? There are nature-based curriculums that are oriented around awe that you can build into schools. There are music-based curriculums you can build into schools. Visual design and art, right? How you teach, be it literature or evolution or whatever the case may be, is in some sense oriented around big ideas, history. So I think this lends itself to very good work to be done in schools from the first moment so you enter on this in kindergarten to the last. So we're working on it. We have a school initiative at the Greater Good Science Center with a lot of awe practices for kids and teachers to start doing.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Great comments and questions, Linda and Dacher. Thank you for answering those. Let's transition over. Let's check in, Chief. Chief Ziman, I gotta first say, I didn't mean to insult you before when I said the NYPD was the greatest police. I caught myself right away and I was looking at you and I thought you were staring me down. You know what I meant. And I love all agencies. I'm gonna stop talking and I had to say that real quick. I'll turn it over to you, Chief. Please don't yell at me. What are your thoughts and comments with Dacher?
I was going to challenge you on that comment, and then I let it go because this is your show. But thank you so much for having me. I actually I have to probably give a caveat here when you say expert panelists, because I'm most certainly not worthy of that at all. I'm a career cop. I don't have a degree in psychology, but just to give you a little background, I started as a young patrol officer to take note of every time I would go on a call and I would see human beings and perhaps the same incident. Let's use a car accident, for example, where some people completely broke down and couldn't handle it, while other people were very resilient about it. No, it's just a piece of metal, and I started to wonder how resilience is built. And it was so interesting to me. So then as I started to move through the ranks in my police department, I started to notice the same about police officers. We have some police officers that are very resilient, while others can, go to the same horrific scene and have issue with it. And, part of the tenure in my tenure of policing has been to try to change the culture so that that officer who is experiencing the struggle or the lack of resilience asks for help. And I'm getting to awe in just a second, but bear with me as I get there. And we've created a culture in policing where that has been absolutely taboo. I have heard my own superiors say, hey, if you can't handle it, get out of this profession. And that's the exact opposite what we want to create, especially in policing, because guys, hurt people, right? And so I started to delve into this concept, and out in the audience is a man named Michael Neela, and he's a former commander in our police department, but he built a curriculum. He's the founder of Blue Courage. So I joined in on this team where we looked at and teach police officers resilience and positive psychology. Because from what we can see is traditional psychology says, asks, what's wrong with you, where positive psychology asks what's right with you. Well, there's still some resistance in policing because when we try to bring in mindfulness, cops push back, right? Because it's like, it's not macho. And so I've even heard cops call it granola. So, what we do is we just change the term from meditation to tactical breathing. Anytime you throw the word tactical in front of it, cops are all in. But we're fighting always the negative default. And this is going to sound like an excuse for police officers, but when police officers see the worst of the worst every day, you call 911 not because you just want to say hello. You call 911 because something horrific has happened, and it starts to feel like 1,000 tiny cuts. And it's like if a mechanic were to work on broken cars all day, they may assume that all cars are broken, and we all know that's not true. So I understand that these awe-inducing events are the things that produce personal change and growth. But it seems to me that, as you mentioned, we stumble upon these things, or maybe we're so busy in our lives that these moments move right past us because we're unconscious. So how can we train ourselves? How can I train my police officers to stop and look for these moments of awe?
What a brilliant summary of where we are in many of the service-oriented professions, right? Veterans, our police officers. I've worked with veterans, and I do a lot of work with healthcare providers who feel the same. It's just chaos and people dying and lots of trauma. And so first, let's just think about resilience, right? Resilience is when, in the face of stress, when your cortisol rises, HPA axis is activated, and you're being overtaken by it. What are the shifts in your mind and in your social community that can move you towards this other profile of high vagus nerve activation, less inflammation, greater ability to concentrate through your prefrontal cortex? How can we shift out of trauma stress to engagement and courage? And I think that you hit upon two things that are really powerful for your community. One is to conceptualize things in terms of courage, right? And we had stories in our research. Some of the veterans that we've worked with talk about reconceptualizing their work in terms of the courage of their colleagues, the courage of the people they serve. I have interviewed a medical doctor who was dealing with people dying, and he was astonished at how much courage his patients showed, right? And a really interesting thing for people to do is to share stories, right, of courage. I do this with every group I teach, is like, let's talk about something awesome your colleague did, right? Once a week at a team meeting, and you get these stories going, which helps do what you're talking about, Chief, which is, how do I look at my work in terms of not handling the worst of human nature, but being bolstered by the best of human nature? Because courage is the best of human nature. And then the second thing is, just to be thinking about team. That, I, in the context of studying Awe, got to interview Steve Kerr, the coach of the Golden State Warriors. And, he deals with a lot of stress and, big egos and losses and the like. And he's like, everything we do as a culture and as a leader here is orienting towards how do we kind of think about the team dimensions of our work. It's a no-brainer, but when you talk about people need to ask for help, they need to collaborate is critical. So, but I love the emphasis on courage.
Absolutely. And I think there's an important distinction to be made there, is that there's no lack of bravery in law enforcement, but there is a lack of courage. And bravery is easy. That's the action oriented. That's the thing that cops are really good at. I'm going to run towards that thing that people run away from. Where courage, and that's where that resilience comes in, is that courage to say, man, that scene that I was just on was really hard for me, and it's a little bigger than me, and I think I need to ask for help. And then also, and then I'll turn it back over. But another thing that you mentioned, the word purpose, and it gets thrown around so much that I believe it gets watered down. But
I agree.
I tend to think that it's a constant reminder. It truly is the drum that we have to keep beating, because if I tell my police officers, go out there and make arrests, write tickets, right? Well, those are things. But truly, when you look at why we do, the why behind the do, why do we write tickets for speeding? So we save lives, so people slow down, and so they don't crash and hurt themselves, and when we make arrests, when we look at it as contributing to justice for a crime victim, when you think of that, it aligns yourself, and that in itself creates, I think, awe. So just
for leaders out there, just to pick up on your brilliant comment, Chief, if you're leading a branch of police, or a tactical team, and you are engaging in feedback with your team, it's good to ask, like, where do you feel awe? What really is most meaningful for you in this work? And there you'll find the deeper version of purpose that you're pointing us to.
Excellent stuff. And I'm trying to keep up with all the comments as well. And this is exactly why we had the Chief and Linda on. And these questions aren't canned. Dacher didn't get these beforehand. And this is exactly why we started off with having two, and I will say, expert panelists. And it's the idea of experts. You're all also leaders, Chief. And I hope you read through all the comments in there. And same thing with Linda and all the leadership and experience, helping connect the dots for the audience members of why this actually really does matter. And one look, we have, I'm going to throw one question to you, Dacher, from the audience. There's been a bunch, but the one thing I look at, and Chief, for you and any of the other first responders, but same thing, Linda, for you in the medical field or the frontline workers, our jobs, and this isn't just first responders and frontline workers, but just speaking to that audience for a moment, our job has built in the awfulness, those bad moments. You can't get rid of that. That's part of our profession. But if we make time for the bad, what do we also have to make sure we make time for? The good. And that's only fair. And this is where I see people write the granola, the voodoo, and all that other BS and bull crap like that. That's people putting up barriers that just aren't healthy. And that's where I've heard other speakers and chiefs saying other things. And we could call for help on the street. Real resilience, true courage is calling for help when you're going through a personal crisis. The question I had for you, Dacher, was going through there, which jumped off at me, and there were a lot of really good ones. Somebody asked, what about that sort of like coming down from that awe moment, and how it can create some negative thinking or negative processing? You have that awe moment, it was awesome, it was wonderful, but then what happens if it starts to create negative thinking once it's gone, or after you watch that video or you read that powerful awe speech? What do you say to that?
Yeah, so we find lots of good research, 3/4 of experiences of awe get you to kind of refine your beliefs, engage with others, get stronger, period, right? Physiologically, socially. 1/4 of awe experiences can destabilize your minds and put you into a state of confusion, like a lot of experiences. So that's the first point. But the second point is, in really stressful professions that I've had the privilege of working with, like veterans, first responders, police officers, and the like, there's just a lot of stress. And much as we have physical regimes and diet regimes, we need regimes for our minds. It's continual work, right? We got to work at it. And what I love about awe is you can translate it to things that are not woo-woo or voodoo or whatever you call it. It's about being in nature, finding teams you love and rooting for them. It's about a spiritual practice, which 80% of Americans have, or 85%. It's about listening to your favorite music. It's about being in thinking about something that's designed, like a car or a part of a city that you love. It's about people who inspire you. That's universal, right? And we just got to work at it. You know, it's just part of, and I will say, I think the medical field, I've been working them for 15 years, Kaiser Permanente, they're making progress. The medical field used to have a lot of the properties of first responders, trauma, people not asking for help, not taking care of themselves. We need this work vitally.
Yeah, spot on. And that's part of was the idea of trying to bring those two groups and communities together, saying, hey, look, they might be a step or two ahead of us, and first responders can definitely learn from them. In just a couple quick seconds, last thoughts and comments from Linda, Chief, and then we'll end it with you, Dacher. Linda?
So my last thought and comment, you know, for health workers and people on the front lines and trying to be helpful to them. It's interesting what you said is that they have made progress. They were under tremendous pressure over the last 10 to 15 years. Even before COVID, about reducing costs, about increased patient satisfaction. The really spotlight has shifted now to law enforcement in many ways because of some of the horrific events that took place this last year. Do you think it's real progress, or it's just that the pressure has moved? And what do we do about that longer term? So that's just a question.
Great. Thanks, Linda. Chief?
I'll just leave it at Inside Out is my favorite movie, even though I'm an adult and it's an animated film. So I feel like that does give me some credibility, and learning today that you were behind the scenes on that. That's really cool. But I honestly, this is just a thank you for the work that you do. I think, as you mentioned earlier, Linda, you know, in schools, but this truly transcends every profession. And, you know, of course, I'm very law enforcement centric. So I want to know how we can build more resilient police officers. And so I'll be sharing your work with my officers and passing it on as much as I possibly can. So just thank you so much for having me here as a non-expert.
Thank you.
And Dacher?
Yeah, and I'll just say, you know, this will just take 1 minute, but, you know, 2 years ago, I lost my brother, watched him for 2 years die. He was my companion in life. We did everything together. It was deep trauma, like many of our audience members have faced in their work. And I was lost and inflamed and depressed. And I went in search of awe. And I got out in nature in new ways. I found love for the sports teams I've always followed. I studied big ideas. I, you know, got around people who really inspired me, and it changed my life, and it changed the trauma. And that's available to us all in whatever particular trauma we're facing. And our challenge is to kind of push it within this community with culture change. And I think Jeff's put together the first move of some important culture change. And thank you, Chief and Linda, Chief Kristen, for your brilliant comments. And I'm honored to be part of this.
Great. Thank you so much, Dacher. And Chief, again, Linda, thank you for being part of the panel.